Seiko might be the most confusing brand in watchmaking, not because the watches are complicated, but because the catalog is enormous, and almost nobody maps it clearly before they buy. So they either spend $250 on a watch they outgrow in 6 months, or they step into the wrong tier entirely and wonder why the experience didn't land the way they expected. This guide fixes that. 7 collections. What each one actually is, who it's actually for, and what nobody leads with before you open your wallet. Number 7. Seiko 5 Sports. A watch appears on your screen at 2 in the morning, probably during a rabbit hole that started somewhere else entirely. Automatic movement, day and date, rotating bezel, Seiko logo, and under $500. That's how the story starts for most people. The Seiko 5 Sports is the entry point into mechanical watchmaking for more collectors worldwide than any other single watch family, and the reason is straightforward. It does things that used to belong exclusively to watches costing 3 times as much. Take the caliber 4R36, the movement powering most of the lineup. It hacks, meaning the seconds hand stops when you pull the crown so you can set the time precisely. And it hand wins, meaning you can power it up manually if it's been sitting in a drawer all week. Both of those features were meaningfully rare at this price not long ago. The lineup covers more ground than most buyers realize. The SRPD 55K1, for example, with its dark dial and rotating bezel, has an immediately recognizable silhouette that sits somewhere between a sport watch and a dive watch without fully committing to either. The SRPE 55, nicknamed the Dress KX by the community, changes the bezel to something stationary that presents a cleaner face that holds up in a work environment. The SSK GMT series adds a third hand tracking a second time zone, running on the 4R34 caliber for around $495. A mechanical dual time zone function at that price is genuinely disruptive, as brands charging $1,500 for the same capability have not enjoyed the SSK's existence in the market. And as of May 2026, the lineup expanded again with new 5 sports field models carrying bidirectional compass bezels, the same 4R36 inside, the same 100-meter water resistance, and the same price range. The line keeps adding tools without adding cost. Now the parts the product pages don't lead with. The 4R36 runs to approximately plus or minus 10 to 15 seconds per day in real-world use. That's not a defect. That's the honest reality of a mechanical movement at this price. You'll reset this watch occasionally. If that bothers you, the tier above addresses it. The crystal is Hardlex, Seiko's proprietary hardened mineral glass, more resistant than standard mineral glass, but not sapphire. Sapphire is what most watches above $500 use, and it's nearly scratch-proof in daily wear. Hardlex scratches given time and hard surfaces. Aftermarket sapphire crystal replacements exist and cost very little. But walk in knowing the stock crystal has limits. The honest thing about this tier that most guides skip. The Seiko 5 is not a beautiful watch. It is a real one. The finishing is functional, the bracelet is adequate, and the overall presentation is purposeful rather than refined. That's a description, not a criticism. Many collectors own a Seiko 5, alongside watches that cost 40 times as much, with no sense of contradiction. It earns its place not by looking impressive, but by genuinely being what it says it is. The Seiko 5 is how most people start. The next collection is where the brand stops being casual about what it makes. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 6. Seiko Prospects. There's a specific type of person who buys a Prospects, and you can usually identify them in any watch discussion. They don't ask about the dial color, they ask how deep it goes. Nothing in the Seiko 5 range is ISO certified for professional diving. Prospects is, That's the dividing line. Prospec stands for Professional Specifications. That's not a marketing phrase, it's a technical commitment. It is the tier where tool watch ownership begins in a meaningful sense. These are dive watches, field instruments, and solar sports chronographs engineered for actual use. The kind of use that would permanently damage a Seiko 5 before lunchtime. Everything upgrades when you cross into Prospecs. The crystal goes sapphire, finally. Water resistance starts at 200 meters and climbs to 1,000 meters on the professional dive references. The crown screws down and seals. The case construction is denser, and the steel has more presence on the wrist. And the movements step up substantially. Some watches in this lineup use the 6R series, which offers a 70-hour power reserve, versus the 4R's 41 hours. In practical terms, forget to wear it over a long weekend. Come back Monday morning, and the Prospecs will still be running. That extra 29 hours of reserve gets used more often than buyers expect before they own one. The lineup is wide, so examples are the best way through it. The Turtle SRPE 93 is one of the most recognized, affordable dive watches in existence. The cushion-shaped case gives it a silhouette unlike anything else at the price. Wear one around people who know the category, and you'll get quiet acknowledgement without saying a word. It has been a reference point in the conversation for years without losing its relevance. The Samurai SRPB 51 is its opposite. Angular lugs, sharply cut crown guards, a case that reads like it was designed by someone with a grudge against anything round. This watch divides opinion on forums and review threads, which is usually a signal that the design is doing something with conviction. Safe watches don't split communities. The Alpinist SPB 121 in deep forest green is arguably the most underrated watch in the entire Seiko lineup at any price. Its internal rotating compass bezel, operated by the crown, turning underneath the dial face, is a complication that should get more attention than it does. The design carries genuine cultural weight in collector circles that no specification list fully communicates. It's the watch that makes people who know watches lean forward. And then there's the Speed Timer Solar Chronograph, the SSC 813, nicknamed the Saitona by the community. Solar-powered, meaning no battery changes across the entire lifespan of the watch. A 39mm case that sits somewhere between sport and everyday without committing to either. It has led the conversation in the sub-$700 chronograph category for the past 2 years, and the conversation hasn't moved on because nothing has replaced it. At the professional ceiling of the range, the Marine Master handles depths that almost no buyer will ever personally test. It's there for the people who need it to be there. Here's one thing to know before buying. There is a documented quality control issue across the entry to mid Prospecs range. Not universal, not even common, but present. The chapter ring, the bezel insert, and the dial markers can occasionally arrive from the factory in very slightly different rotational positions. On a field watch you're using for hiking, barely noticeable. On a piece you've just paid $700 for and are examining under a lamp at home, it is everything you see. Buy from an authorized dealer with a proper return policy, or inspect in person before leaving the shop. This is not a deal breaker, it's a thing to know. The observation that gets skipped in most guides is that Prospecs is the tier where Seiko stops being a casual pick and becomes something you research. The collector communities around specific Prospecs references are large, specific, passionate, and technically detailed. There are entire dedicated forums built around a single model. That doesn't happen around watches people don't care deeply about. Prospecs was built to endure. What comes next wasn't built for endurance at all. And that difference is visible the moment you look at one. Number 5. Seiko Presage. What if the most beautiful watch you can buy under $1,000 isn't Swiss? What if it's Japanese? And most buyers walk past it without understanding what they're actually looking at. The Presage line makes one promise and keeps it completely. The dial will stop you. Not the tool watch credentials, not water resistance ratings, not complications. The dial alone. And the methods Seiko uses to achieve those dials, the materials, the techniques, the craft traditions, are the part most buyer guides don't explain. The Cocktail Time series is the entry point into this conversation. The SRPB 43 is the most recognized reference, with a radiating sunburst dial inspired by Tokyo's bar culture. Each colorway named for a specific cocktail, the texture shifting color depending on whether you're under office lighting, natural daylight, or a restaurant candle. Rest your arm on a dinner table, and someone will ask about it before they ask about anything else. That happens consistently enough that owners report it routinely. Further up the lineup, the craft becomes more explicit. The Sharp-Edged series, with the SPB 167 as an example, carries the Asanoha pattern on the dial, a hemp leaf geometric motif used in Japanese design for over 1,000 years, laser-etched and hand-finished. The angular case geometry mirrors that precision with multiple flat surfaces catching light from different directions simultaneously. Above that sits the craftsmanship and enamel tier. Hand-applied enamel, porcelain finishing, techniques borrowed from Japanese decorative arts traditions that have nothing to do with the watch industry and everything to do with why these dials stop people. The Style 60 series takes a quieter direction. Rounder, vintage-era case shapes, retro details, something for buyers who want history rather than geometry. Most of it runs on 6R series and 8R series movements, up to 70 hours of power reserve. No solar quartz, no shortcuts. Two things to confirm before buying. Entry-level presage models, including some Cocktail Time references, use Hardlex crystal. Sapphire begins at the sharp-edged level and above. The specific reference page will tell you what you're buying, so check it before checkout. The stock leather straps on entry-level references are mediocre, stiff, with a deployment clasp that doesn't cooperate the way it should. A replacement strap from any reputable maker is inexpensive and takes 20 minutes to swap. The transformation is immediate and significant enough that it's worth doing before you show the watch to anyone. The observation worth making, because most guides skip it. Presage fills a real gap that Swiss watchmaking has largely abandoned. Mid-price dress watches with genuine craft behind the dial, not just a clean sunray finish and a branded strap, have almost disappeared from Swiss brands in this range. Hamilton moved toward the field and sport. Longines makes fine watches, but the dials rarely do anything unexpected. Presage surprises you regularly, deliberately, at $350 to $2,000. That is rarer than it sounds, and the watch community hasn't made enough noise about it. If your life includes meetings, dinners, or any setting where how you present yourself carries weight, and you don't want to spend over $1,000 doing it, the Presage is the watch that should be talked about louder than it is. Presage earns its price through pure craft. Number 4 earns it with something completely different, technology that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth at any price. Number 4. Seiko Astron. Dubai. 10:30 Tuesday night. Landed from London 3 hours ago. Meeting in Tokyo Thursday morning. The clock in the hotel room says something. Your phone says something else. The Astron on your wrist already corrected itself while the plane was still descending, caught a GPS satellite through the cabin window, read the atomic time signal, identified the local time zone, and adjusted. You didn't touch anything. That's not a pitch line. That's what this watch physically does. The Astron's GPS solar technology connects to positioning satellites to adjust time zones automatically anywhere on Earth, not once a day, not when you manually trigger it, but when it sees sufficient signal and determines a correction is needed. Solar charging means the watch runs on light, window light, office light, natural daylight, and will never, across the entire lifespan of this watch, need a battery replacement. The premium models, like the SSH 186 from the 145th anniversary range, add a lightweight titanium case and sapphire bezels that resist the daily scratching that eats conventional finishes. The overall package is architecturally bolder, wider on the wrist, more instrument-like in presence, clearly communicating that this is tech-forward rather than heritage-influenced. For a specific type of buyer, someone moving between international time zones regularly, someone who wants a watch that is simply never wrong and never needs anything, the Astron is the most straightforwardly useful purchase in this entire guide. Now for the caveat that matters more here than anywhere else in this guide. The Astron are quartz watches. A genuinely extraordinary quartz, but still quartz. There is no mechanical gear train inside, no mainspring, no oscillating balance wheel. The second hand moves in discrete steps, and for a meaningful portion of people who find themselves watching this kind of content, that distinction matters philosophically. The sweeping motion of a mechanical second hand carries a different feeling on the wrist, something harder to quantify but real enough that collectors who care about it really care about it. If you are one of those people, the Astron will feel technically impressive and emotionally flat simultaneously. Be honest with yourself about which side of that line you're on before spending $3,000. It's also a large watch. Bold, tech-forward, not trying to disappear on the wrist. That's the point for the buyers. It suits. For buyers who want something quieter, it isn't. The Astron doesn't compete with anything else in this guide on emotional or historical grounds. It competes on one question. How much time do you want to spend managing your watch? If the answer is none, this is the right answer. The Astron is built around precision and convenience. The next lineup puts every inconvenience back, and collectors want it anyway. Number 3. King Seiko. In the 1960s, two divisions inside the Seiko Corporation went to war with each other. Not literally, but the internal competition between Seiko's Suwa factory, developing what would become Grand Seiko, and the Dani factory building King Seiko, was one of the most consequential rivalries in post-war watchmaking. Both groups were racing to produce Japan's most precise, most beautifully finished timepiece. The Suwa side chased technical performance. The Dani side chased design purity. Each pushed the other far further than any external competition ever could have. King Seiko movements from that era held tolerances that would have embarrassed well-regarded Swiss manufacturers working at the same time. Then the line was eventually discontinued, and when Seiko revived it in 2021, they were betting that enough collectors understood the history to respond, and the market confirmed they'd read it correctly. The visual identity of a King Seiko is the lug geometry. Sharp, angular, drawn with a geometric exactness that creates genuine tension in the case, the kind of tension modern dress watches almost never attempt. Seiko applies the same Zaratsu hand polishing technique here that defines Grand Seiko's case finishing. Flat surfaces with zero optical distortion. No ripple, no curve artifact. But King Seiko gives that technique more geometry to work with, more edges meeting at precise angles, more surfaces catching light from different positions simultaneously. The SPB 279 Slim Heritage reissue is the clearest example of this at work. It wears beautifully on narrower wrists, which is itself unusual in a market that spent the better part of a decade fixated on 41 and 42 millimeter diameters. The 2026 editions are worth knowing. New titanium King Seiko models launched earlier this year carry the 8L45 caliber with a 72-hour power reserve, a meaningful mechanical step-up, and the lighter titanium case changes the wearing experience noticeably. The KS1969 145th Anniversary Limited Edition pulls directly from the original 1960s design language for buyers who want the historical reference to be explicit. Here's the honest conversation this tier requires. The movement criticism exists, and it's defensible. At $1,500 to $3,200, the 6R series calibers inside most King Seiko references are accurate and reliable, but not technically ambitious, not a high-beat movement, not something that announces itself when you open the case back. Some collectors feel a watch at this price should offer a more distinguished movement under that beautifully finished case, and that position is fair. What it misses is that King Seiko isn't selling a movement, it's selling a position inside a specific, documented story. That is Japan's post-war watchmaking industry competing internally at standards that had no practical reason to exist, driven entirely by the desire to be the best. The angular lug geometry isn't an aesthetic decision made in a studio. It's a direct visual quotation from a manufacturing culture that only one organization on Earth can claim. Wearing a King Seiko is wearing that argument without needing to explain it. The collector who this resonates with knows immediately. They usually don't need to be told twice. King Seiko carries 60 years of history in its case angles. Number 2 carries something else, a finishing standard the industry still argues about. Number 2. Grand Seiko. Stop thinking of Grand Seiko as Seiko's best watch. The framing was already inaccurate 5 years ago. In 2026, it's completely wrong. Grand Seiko is a separate brand with a shared corporate parent and founding family. The boutiques are independent, the distribution is independent, and the artisans work in separate ateliers in the mountains of Iwate and Shizuoka, facilities where some of the most demanding finishing standards on Earth are maintained by people who trained for years to do one specific thing correctly, and nothing else. Grand Seiko doesn't compete with the Prospects or the Presage. It competes with Rolex, Omega, and with what the industry calls the Holy Trinity, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Vacheron Constantin. Most people who hear that for the first time find it difficult to believe. And then they hold one. The case finishing is what lands first. Zaratsu polishing, a technique adapted from Japanese mirror grinding and sword-making traditions, produces flat surfaces with zero optical distortion. No ripple and no curve artifact where the surface transitions. Hold a Grand Seiko case at an angle under light, and the reflection is geometrically exact in a way that conventional case polishing doesn't achieve. This isn't a branding statement, it's visible in about 2 seconds with the naked eye. Compare it to a Rolex at the same price point, and you're looking at 2 different philosophies about what finished means. Then there are the dials. The Snowflake SBGA 211 has become one of the most recognized modern watch dials in existence, and it earns that position. A matte white texture inspired by snowfall across Japan's Shinshu Highlands, with a 3-dimensional depth that cameras have never fully captured. Every photograph of the snowflake undersells it. You need the actual watch in your hands to understand what photographers are trying and failing to capture. It catches light the way actual snow does, shifting, absorbing, reflecting at different rates across the same surface, depending on the angle and source. The white birch SLGA 009 does something similar with lacquered birch bark texture. These aren't printed or photographed effects, they are surfaces. The Seasons collection dials render Japan's seasons in textures that no Swiss brand at any price has attempted to replicate. Underneath many of these dials is the spring drive movement. And the spring drive deserves more than a brief mention. The spring drive is mechanical at its core, with a mainspring, gear train, and the full traditional architecture of a mechanical watch. But instead of a conventional ticking escapement to regulate energy release, it uses an electronic glide wheel, a quartz oscillator acting as a governor, braked electromagnetically, drawing no external power, deriving everything from the mechanical energy already inside the watch. The result is a seconds hand that doesn't tick and doesn't step. It glides, a single continuous arc, uninterrupted, 60 seconds, no hesitation. Standard spring drive accuracy reaches plus or minus 1 second per day, outperforming most mechanical movements at any price point. In 2026, that standard was pushed further. At Watches and Wonders this April, they introduced the Spring Drive UFA Ushio 300 Diver, references SLGB 023 in ocean blue and SLGB 025 in deep tidal green. UFA stands for ultra-fine accuracy. The caliber inside, the 9RB1, is guaranteed at an annual rate of plus or minus 20 seconds per year. Not per day, not per week, per year. That is the most accurate mainspring-powered wristwatch movement in the world as of today. The name Ushio means tide in Japanese, and the dial carries a wave pattern texture in blue and green that references ocean current movement. The case measures 40.8 millimeters in diameter and 12.9 millimeters thick, finally bringing Grand Seiko's dive watch into dimensions that work on a broad range of wrist sizes, down significantly from the 43 and 44 millimeter pieces in previous dive generations. High-intensity titanium construction makes the case 30% lighter than steel. 300 meters of water resistance, a 7-2-hour power reserve. Retail price, $12,400. That puts it in direct comparison with the Rolex Submariner date Oyster Steel, which sits at around 12,000 euros in the European market. At that level, in terms of case finishing quality, movement precision, and dial artistry, the comparison is not a comfortable one for the Submariner to sit in. The honest word on the full range? Grand Seiko entry points start around $3,000. At $3,000 to $5,000, you are genuinely competing with the best dive watches and dress pieces produced, and in specific areas, winning outright. At $10,000 and above, you are in serious collector territory. At $12,400 for the Ushio UFA, you own the most technically precise automatic dive movement currently available to a civilian buyer anywhere on Earth. Try one on before making any decision. Not to buy it, just to try it. For a certain kind of person, the 20 seconds you spend with it on your wrist end every conversation you thought you needed to have. Grand Seiko is the answer most people expect at number one. It isn't. What's next has been making watches at this level and above it in near complete silence for decades. Number 1. Creedor. In April 2026, a watch brand walked into Watches and Wonders Geneva, the most important trade show in the industry, for the first time in its history. Not a new brand. A brand that has been producing platinum tourbillons, hand-applied enamel dials, and spring drive movements decorated beyond Grand Seiko's specification for years. That brand is Creedor, and the fact that most people watching this have never heard of it is not an accident. Creedor is the Seiko Group's ultra-luxury division, positioned above Grand Seiko, built around Japanese haute horlogerie, and until 2026 sold almost exclusively within Japan. The concept dates to the 1970s, originally conceived as a vehicle for precious metal quartz watches, and evolved into the home for everything Seiko wanted to build that didn't fit Grand Seiko's aesthetic discipline. Less constrained by heritage consistency, more experimental in shape and decoration, using craft techniques that sit closer to fine art than to watchmaking in the conventional sense. The Micro Artist Studio, Seiko's highest-level craft facility, produces some of Creedor's most significant pieces. The spring drive movement, inside the Kuon GCLX 995, the collection's relative entry point, at around $10,200, is the hand-wound 7R31 caliber, decorated to a higher specification than most Grand Seiko references. The new blue ceramic dial variant, launched earlier in 2026, has a surface quality that resists easy description. It's the kind of detail that makes people stop putting it down. The Gold Feather collection is where Creedor's identity becomes explicit. Ultra-thin hand-wound cases, dials built using Japanese craft traditions that barely exist outside specialist workshops. The Gold Feather GCBY 991, released in February 2026, uses the Imari Nabeshima porcelain technique, a method so specialized it was considered largely secretive within the ceramics world before this piece brought it to light. 60 pieces worldwide, at approximately $15,600. Above that, the Gold Feather Tourbillon GBCF 997 shown at Watches and Wonders this April. Platinum case, 25 pieces globally, at approximately $210,000. The Micro Artist Studio produced the movement decoration by hand. There are photographs. The photographs do not prepare you. Then there's the locomotive, designed originally by Gerald Genta, the man responsible for the Royal Oak and the Nautilus, two of the most consequential watch designs of the 20th century. The hexagonal case pays direct homage to Genta's geometric design language. It's currently the only Creedor reference available globally without boutique-level access, and its presence at Watches and Wonders signals something. Creedor is beginning, on its own terms and at its own pace, to introduce itself to collectors outside Japan. The honest word about this tier is that Creedor's inaccessibility is not a marketing failure, it's a position. A brand that limits its English catalog to 12 of 72 models, that operated a Japanese-only website until recently, that attended the industry's most global stage for the first time only this year. That's not a brand that couldn't figure out international distribution. That's a brand that decided its audience would find it, rather than building the audience from the outside in. Whether that changes now that it has stepped into the global spotlight is one of the more interesting open questions in the watch world over the next few years. For buyers, Creedor pieces are acquired through authorized boutiques in Japan or select international partners. Some pieces carry no official international retail price. You make inquiries rather than placing online orders. For the right collector, someone who has moved through prospects, through presage, through Grand Seiko, and is still looking for what sits above it, Creedor is the answer. It was always the answer. Most people just didn't know to ask. So here is all of it. If something in the Seiko lineup shifted something for you, find a way to cop yours. Ask about the pieces they don't list online. Order off the menu they don't show you. Some of the most serious watchmaking produced anywhere on Earth lives there, quietly, waiting for the people who go looking. This thread running through every tier of this catalog, from a $400 Seiko 5 Sports to a Creedor Tourbillon, is the same one that has defined this brand since Kintaro Hattori founded it in Tokyo in 1881. Not chasing what everyone else is building what they believe in, and waiting for the world to catch up. For over 100 years, they've been right more often than they've been wrong. If this gave you a clearer map of where you belong in the catalog, hit like and subscribe. Every week, this channel breaks down exactly what's worth your money in watches and what's just packaging wearing a price tag. See you in the next one.